Yo, what's up, guys? It's Lay here, and I'm going to be doing another video similar to the communication overflow one I made about a month ago. This time, now that we have the bounce patch, I'll be going over the Master Summoner core combinations. So the two bounce patches we got at once brought over a couple things. One, it massively nerfed the Ancient Sphere build, and two, it reworked one of our arc passive nodes, both of which are highly impactful for this comparison. I'll be mainly focusing on the different arc grid based builds this video. And I'll be referring to them by different codes of numbers. So for example, 111, 222, or 131. Now, if you watched my last video, you'll know what those mean, but in case you didn't, I'm referring to specifically the order in the UI that these scores show up in. So first of all, you can see Master Summoner has 6 different cores. The first 3 are always communication overflow. So for the video, we're going to ignore this because we know we're playing Master Summoner. We're only going to look at these bottom 3, these bottom 3, and these bottom 3. This top Sun core is named 1, this is 2, and this is 3. And it's the same for all of them. So right now selected, I have a 1-3-1 setup. So Sun core 1, inherited power, Moon core 3, elemental ring, and Star core 1, balance of power. I would switch to this. This would be called a 2-2-2 setup. This would be a 3-2-3 setup. That's how we name the cores. And now the balance patch greatly nerfed the 2 core for Sun and the 2 core for Moon, which were focused on the Ancient Spear build, and didn't really touch anything else. The other changes for the other cores came in the Arc passive, where we got this node reworked. This node used to only give critical damage to Ancient Elemental skill builds, and now it gives straight up damage to both normal and Ancient skills, and gives us 10% move speed for just putting 1 point in it. This is a greatly needed rework, because if we did not use Ancient Elemental skills, like the Spear build, you didn't really want to run this because you weren't running Phoenix Magi. You didn't really want to run the old version of this because you weren't running any Ancient skills, and these are CO points. This was reworked mostly for the Spear build, but now almost every Master Summoner build will run at least 1 point in it. This is just a very solid, efficient node. Now, real quick, I'm going to just show you the data I gathered from doing all my DPS tests. So on the left side, you can see a quick summary of how all the builds rank against each other, and I normalized it with the most generic 111 Phoenix setup. On the right, you can see the actual raw numbers of all my trials and their means, whatever, with a little summary at the top of that for their DPS setups. Now on the left, you'll see in bold something about Aftershock. Now, what does this mean? And why is it only on 2 builds? The 333 build and the 111 build each have a 2 AS, so 2 Aftershock version, and a 1 AS, a 1 Aftershock version. Now, this is a very specific thing to do with Phoenix, which is why you only see it in the 111 build, which is focused on Phoenix, and the 333 build, which is focused on cycling, which means you'll be using all the ancient skills, including Phoenix. Now, I'll go in-game to quickly demonstrate what I mean by all this. If you look at the Phoenix animation, there's going to be little explosions after the initial Phoenix pass. These are the aftershocks. There's 4 of them. They look like 1, 2, 3, 4. Their position is a bit random, but they do 10% of the initial hit's damage, so they're very relevant. And if I hug the boss here, I send the Phoenix, only 1 aftershock, the one right next to me, hit. But if I walk a little bit away, and I do the same thing, now 2 hit. Which means I basically doubled the aftershock damage by just my positioning. But also the boss's hitbox is relevant. These 2 factors are a big deal for the efficiency of build, both in Shuxian and in real raids. So the Phoenix build with 2 aftershock and the Psycho build with 2 aftershock outperform the 1 aftershock variant. Of course, it does more, getting more hits and doing more damage. But that means when you choose this build, if you're going against something that's a huge hitbox that is reliable on you hitting many aftershocks, like Behemoth or like Mortem Gate 3, Phoenix-based builds will do a lot better than if the boss is high mobility and small, like in Act 2 Belshazzar, Gate 2, or for example, Act 4 Gate 1 Echidna. And you'll see later when I go into more details of my tests why this is so relevant. But anyway, now I'm going to go into a notepad, which will go into much more detail about all the tests and trials I did. This is the notepad. So quickly going over my standard setup. I used Grudge and Keen Blunt in all my tests. And then the spear build used a mass increase Ray Captain, while all the other builds used Crystal Hitmaster. Stat wise, all the builds used a heavy spec with some off crit setup, except for the spear build that used a more balanced swift crit setup, completely negating spec. Everything was tested with full 10s, although all the builds here have one skill that does a majority of its damage, so they're all efficient at just having one higher level gem. But for the purposes of these tests, I used full 10s. I did 5 2 times minute trials in Trixion per core setup. Also, all the books were full relics, and I had simulated a stone that was 2 grudge, 2 adrenaline, try to keep everything as standard as possible. All the builds except for Spear had a 100% crit chance, while Spear only had 90%. But this was also taken into account because I was using about 12 Spears every trial, which means I would be expecting around 11 plus or minus 1 to crit every trial. All the trials were within this margin. Without further ado, let's go over the different builds. So these will be the first 3 builds of the generic builds focused on Phoenix, Akir, or Jahia. Here you'll see the exact art grid I selected for the Phoenix build because I'll be talking about that first. Now, all 3 of these builds follow the same principle of pre-art grid and even pre-art passive Master Summoner. This is a crit spec focused build on only using your ancient skills, and all your other skills' job is to just build gauge for them with a bit of damage coming from your ancient spear and T skill. You have access to your big burst and triple Akir, and whatnot. So looking over at the Phoenix build first, it's using 2 Ancient Whisper points, but you could go 1 point into Ancient Wind if you want that 10% move speed, because that class is quite slow. And if you look at the DPS rankings, it's either rank 4 or rank 7, depending on if 2 Aftershocks hit or 1 Aftershock hits. And I would say, even if you get a situation where 2 hit, its performance is so low that I would never recommend running Phoenix. First of all, there's not that many bosses where we can get free 2 or more Aftershock hits. Only really Mordum and Armoche. And Mordum, you can get even more. So on specifically Mordum, you could run Phoenix if you're enjoying generic gameplay. But outside of that, I would not recommend it. The next setup I'm going to talk about is the Akir. So here you can see only the Moon Core has switched. And this Moon Core switch is only really relevant if you're able to get the Moon Core beyond 17p. So either 18, 19, or 20. And then you don't need to put any points in Ancient Whisper, so you put both of them in Ancient Wind. Its DPS is a bit lower than Phoenix if it ran 2 Aftershock, but again, I ran my tests without 18, 19, and 20p. So if I was able to go a bit higher on my core's points, Akir would be a bit better than Phoenix. The big advantage, though, over Akir over Phoenix, and the reason I'd recommend it, is that you don't care about the Aftershock hits. So, first of all, your baseline is better on a small hitbox, for example, Kazaros or Act 4 Gate 1. Also, the animation was greatly sped up from before, which I can demonstrate right now. You can see Akir here, after he spawns in, will detonate much faster and get all of his damage off much faster. This is one of the main reasons we used to run Phoenix over Akir, because of his front-loaded nature compared to Akir, but now that's no longer an issue. The last core setup we can talk about is the Jahia build. We changed the star core. But this build, in my opinion, is just strictly worse than the Akir build. Its only advantage is that it gives you a periodic shield when you use Jahia, and Jahia does more stagger. But there's currently no really hard stagger checks that would warrant this. And with Akir's animation speed up, Jahia just has lost its purpose, and its damage is lower anyway, with lower scaling. So the 17, 18, 19p bonuses you get from Akir don't apply to Jahia. So I would have absolutely no reason you would ever want to run over Akir or Phoenix. This is definitely the worst of the 3. Even though its baseline is higher than Phoenix. Basically, just run Phoenix on really large hitboxes, run Akir otherwise, don't run Jahia. That's the TLDR, what to do with the generic skill. Okay, now moving on to the 3-3-3 cycle build. I'm going to skip over the Swift Spear build for now, and I'll come back to it later. This cycle build is an enhancement and evolution of the generic build. It's still spec crit, you're still mainly focused on ancient elementals, but now you're incentivized and kind of forced to cycle between all of them. Um, this means that you get some advantages because you get to use all of them, which is kind of cool, but you also get some clunkiness because they're all different. Now, the way this works is if I go in game and I set up those cores, so the 3, 3, 3. If I use an ancient element, like right now I am on Alimaji, it'll automatically move me to Phoenix and get a buff on me that'll make my next Phoenix a bit stronger. And this is true for all of them. That's how the build works. This means even though you're cycling through all of them, they're still their own skill with their own hitbox, animation time, and random quirks. So this is definitely going to be some getting used to, and there's going to be a learning period as you get used to it. But you would be rewarded because its damage is actually quite good. It's rank 2, very close to its rank 1 on 2 Aftershock. On a single Aftershock, it is a bit further behind, but it also still offers all the good things that spec build offers, which is really high burst with triple Akir. So if a boss phases a lot, you're going to have a good time. Although the triple Akir is a bit more specific, because again, since you're cycling, you want to start on a specific ancient skill. So my recommendation is you start on Ali Maji, and you go into Phoenix and Jahia for your triple Akir. But Phoenix, Jahia, Akir is also an option. I can demonstrate how this combo looks like real quick here in an example. So you'd want to start on Osh, either if you pre-stimmed or something, you just want to use a random Osh. You're either in your rotation or before the raid starts to get the Alimaji buff. Then you'll use your skills to stack Adrenaline. And then you'll enter the combo like this. And now you're cycling all the elements just like you would normally in a triple Akir combo, but it's just different elements coming out. And that's how the build works. And its performance is quite good. Unfortunately, I thought its performance would be closer to Spear after all the nerfs, but Spear still seems a tad bit stronger than the alternatives. Now we can move on to the Spear build, and what I would say is the strongest build that Master Summoner has to offer. And the one I would recommend you run if you have to choose between all the builds. So it's also the most different. It leaves the spec behind and instead goes for a more even swift crit setup. This means it's also much more mobile and much more snappy than all the other summoner builds. It has the highest DPS and it's all sustained. It does have a burst combo that is a bit tighter than the triple Akir combos of the other builds, but it's still doable as long as you have level 8 gems. And despite all its nerfs, it's still on top. Also, because it's a swift build, it has really strong utility in the form of speed charges, stagger, and Ancient Spear's weak point and stagger. So you're kind of bringing everything with no downside. And the way the build works is that the core converts your Ancient Spear into a gauge spender. So when I use my spear here, you'll see my gauge gets consumed by 3 orbs, and it'll do additional damage. Also, from earlier, you can see the spear is much faster. So even though you're spending a lot of time casting it, you will be doing perfectly fine on animation locks because it's almost 40% faster than the spear you were used to before. Now, I mentioned a bit the burst combo from earlier. This burst combo is trying to get 2 spears into an Atro window. So it is a bit tight. The way you're going to want to do it is after you cast your spear, you're not going to Atro immediately. You're going to wait a bit and Atro right before the spear actually lands. And also what's important is that we run Conviction on Sticky Moss Swamp and Judgment on Fleeting Galebird, and you're going to want to have this buff active. So you do have to do a bit of management on your Conviction Judgment. But if you're bursting at the opener or at the start of a phase, typically this is off cooldown anyway, and it's not that big of a deal. And so the way it looks like is you're going to start the rotation by using those skills, get your Conviction Judgment up. Mine, for some reason, did not proc. Quite unlikely, so we'll just do it again. So you're going to get all your stuff up. Conviction's going to proc, Judgment's going to proc. You're going to use Spear. Activate the timer as if I'm activating Atro. Use all the other skills you want. Then immediately spear again. And right here, boom, it'll hit before it runs out. And you'll have 2 spears in Atro for a large burst window. The only downside of this burst window compared to the ones we're used to with Triple Akir is that none of this is push immune. So you're on a very tight timer. You can't delay this spear at all. And the boss has to not move, so you're able to get it off immediately, and you have to be under no pressure. So it will take some good positioning and some good timing for you to know when to do it. But if you're able to do it, you'll be getting a lot more damage out of people that are only Atroing on a single spear instead of double. Because the spear is basically the only skill that matters in terms of your DPS output. So this is it for my brief overview of all the builds. And normally I would end the video now and just go into 30-second clips of each of the builds, examples, and Trixion. But unlike the CO video, I feel like Master Summoner has a very specific mechanic that's core to it called animation canceling. I'd like to go over real quick before I pass you off to all random Trixion clips. So in this next section, I'll be going over a bit on how animation canceling works and how important it is to Master Summoner. So the reason animation canceling is so important is because our skills have a lot of aftercasts and they're very slow. We want to cut down on this aftercast. So what I mean by aftercast is if you look at me casting Spear here, after this bar fills up, my character is going to start actually doing an animation of swinging down right now. And during that whole animation, I'm completely locked. I can't move. I can't cast any other skill. I just have to wait. However, if a skill has a channel bar, which on Summoner, both the Spear build and the Spec builds, which are Spear and Electric Storm, they both have a little bar here that's charging. If you see that bar, that means the skill is able to be animation canceled by another skill. That's the requirement for a skill to be animation cancelable. Now, what's the requirement for a skill to actually be able to animation cancel another skill? That means when you use the skill, you see a little indicator. If I click on my Ancient Spear here, or my Earth Collapse, or my Electric Storm, or my T skill, or Alimaji, or Akir, they all have an indicator. It means they're able to animation cancel other skills for you. Now, if you don't see that option, that means your settings are missing something. If you go under Gameplay and Control Settings, Skill Instant Cast needs to be ticked off. And don't worry, this is character bound. So even though this is ticked off, on my other characters, I can still have instant cast. But for Summoner, you really need this to be not enabled. So you can do this animation cancel. Now, the way the animation cancel actually works mechanically is that while you're channeling, so while you see this bar filling up, you prepare another skill. So I'm going to animation, for this demonstration, I'm going to animation cancel Ancient Spear with Earth Collapse, which is an extremely important combo in the Ancient Spear build. So I'm going to click Ancient Spear. As it's channeling, I'm going to click Earth Collapse, and I can see the circle, but I'm not going to click again. I'm just going to wait. The second that bar fills up, I'm going to re-click Earth Collapse for the second time, which will confirm the skill cast and completely stop my animation. So I'll go from this, no animation cancel, to this animation cancel. You see how much faster that was? And what's also important when you do this on specifically the Ancient Spear build is look at the cooldowns of Ancient Spear and Earth Collapse if I do them animation canceled. Messed up there. They're perfectly synced up. This is important because if you run the Spear build, your Destiny Activator from Mooncore is using Earth Collapse, and your Destiny Spender from Spear is using your Spear. So you always want, for every Spear you want to use an Earth Collapse. Now, because we use Spear into Earth Collapse, it means before the raid starts and you're in the circle, you just send a random Ancient Spear somewhere, or a random Earth Collapse somewhere, which gives you your Destiny buff. And now, as long as you always use these two skills together, and animation cancel the Spear with the Earth Collapse, they will always be in sync. The second you spend the Destiny proc, you'll be refilling it. You can do this perpetually. Other skills can also animation cancel, although you would, again, not want to do this on the Swift Ancient Spear build. because you want to pair these two skills. But Electric Storm is another build with another skill with a bar, and my T skill has a circle. So I could do Electric Storm and cancel it with my T skill just like that. Now, the other build that really wants to do this is the spec builds. Now, the spec builds are slower than the Swift Spear build, so you could argue animation canceling is even more important on them. And also, they are running spec. So they want to do the triple Akir combo, and the triple Akir combo is really reliant on quick animation canceling to try to fit everything in not only your Atro window, but to not waste any gauge. Because if you take too long to chain your skills, you will overcap on gauge. Okay, so now that my cooldowns are up, I was able to swap to my spec build. And so, again, on the spec version of Master Summoner, you're mostly focused on animation canceling two specific skills, which are your Ancient Spear and your Electric Storm, just like before. But obviously your Spear is now much, much slower. And this is going to be very important in the triple Akir combo. So I'll demonstrate it first with just Akir. So this is the generic 1-3-1 build. 1-3-1. And during the Akir combo, you're going to want to start with 4 different skills to pre-stack your adrenaline. So in this case, Shurdy, Moss, Release to a Water Ellie. And then you're going to enter the combo, and you're going to use Electric Storm, which you can animation cancel with Akir, because Electric Storm is a channel, and Akir is a indicator. After this Akir, you're going to use Awakening, into another Akir immediately, into Spear, which is a channel, be canceled by Mariposa, because it's an indicator, and then you'll do your last third Akir for the full combo. So it looks like this. Pre-stack Adrenaline, I Storm into Animation Cancel, Awakening, and I start spamming Akir. Now I use Ancient Spear into my T skill, into another Akir. That's the full combo. If you don't Animation Cancel, you're not going to be able to chain this properly, and you'll be losing a lot of damage and gauge. This sequence also works for the generic setup. For the cycle setup. 3-3-3. The only difference is, since you're not using 3 Akirs, certain ancient skills, specifically Phoenix and Jahia, don't have an indicator. They just instantly go when you click them. So those skills you can't animation cancel with. That's why my advice is to start on Ali Maji. So for example, let's say you start the raid, you stimmed in the spawn, and you used an Osh. So now your Ali Maji is ready to go. And we're going to start the fight just like we did before. We're going to do the same combo. We're going to do 1, 2, 3, our 4 precasts. To Storm, Animation Cancel. We're going to use Akir into Phoenix. Mariposa, Animation Cancel, and then Jahia at the end. And that's how the whole combo works. So these animation cancels are very, very important. You won't be able to chain them otherwise. And you could probably practice it in Trixion for 2 minutes and get it right away. So if you want to play Summoner and you want to do the build properly, I highly recommend you learn how to animation cancel. Not as relevant for CO, but for Master Summoner, it's very relevant. Anyway, that was it. So thanks for watching the video if you made it this far. I'll now chain 5 clips of the different builds during their Trixion, so you can see kind of how they play and their burst damage or whatever. And I'll see you in the next one.